Well, good morning again. My name's Steve Howarth. I'm a speaker for Toybox. I'm normally a maths teacher. That's what I normally do for a living. So hence the numbers this morning and all our stats and sums. But whenever they invite me to, I go to churches and I talk for Toybox. I got involved with Toybox about 8 years ago. It was a chance thing, as these things often are. I was in charge of my church at the time, their youth group, and I used to do the 8 to 11-year-olds. And I sent them away one summer for the summer holidays, and I said, right, we're going to do some fundraising in the autumn. I want you to go away and find out about a charity that we can fundraise for. And they all went off to New Wine, and I thought, to be honest, they'd probably forget and not come back with anything, but they all went off to New Wine as a sort of a church group, and they met the Toybox people at the Toybox stand, really taken by it. They came back and said, we want to raise some money for Toybox. So that started off a big sort of year of fundraising. And during that time, of course, I got to know all about Toybox and what they stood for, and really kind of was just moved to the point of wanting to stay involved. And that's what I do now. I do fundraising for them, but also now I do speaking for them. So that's my history and how I've come to be here. Normally, when I come and do these talks, I come and tell the congregation all about Toybox, and then I'll finish up by asking them if they would to sort of give money. But it's nice this morning because it's slightly different. I've come really to say thank you, because walking in today, I can see on your wall there that you're already supporting Toybox. I can see the picture of little Sheila, one of the South American children that we have as our ambassadors, and there she was on the wall. So it's lovely. So this morning, it's more about saying a big thank you for the good work that you're already doing. Thank you for the money you're already giving. Okay, so the question is, who are Toybox? Well, Toybox is a Christian organisation, and they were founded in 1992. Now, those with long memories might be able to think back and remember that at the time, around 1992, there was a documentary that really struck a chord. It was on the television, and it was all about South American and Central American street children. And it was a horrific documentary, really, because it was all about the fact that these children were on the streets, no one was caring for them, and in fact their plight was so bad that they were being rounded up and sometimes shot by police just to get rid of them, treated almost like rats. That was the story that was on the documentary. So, as you can imagine, lots of people were moved to do something about this, and a lot of those people got together, and Toybox was formed. They have some real core values to Toybox, which have permeated through all the work they've done since 1992 and to today. And Toybox's vision is of a just world where there are simply no street children at all. And they aim to achieve this through their mission, and the mission is to end the injustice of children living and working on the streets. And their key value is courage, something I'll come back to later, but courage to do the right thing and speak the truth about injustice. Okay, so who are these street children? Well, this is the definition that you'll find from the UN of what a street child is. A street child is boys or girls for whom the street has become their home and or livelihood, and who are inadequately protected or supervised by any responsible adults. These are children who've had to grow up and face the adult world far too quickly. And sadly, and this is the scary fact, there are hundreds of millions of street children around the world. Now, if you think about that number, hundreds of millions. In this country alone, there's only 70 million odd people in total, so hundreds of millions. There are more street children around the world than you'll find in the people in the UK. It's not just South and Central America either. You could go to India and you'd find millions of street children there. Other big cities in Asia or places in Africa, there are street children all around us. Thankfully, not many in this country at all. We could probably count on our fingers the we'd find here, but there are some. But nonetheless, around the world, there are hundreds of millions, which is, to me, a scary fact. Now, the reasons children become street children is complicated. And why would a child decide to leave home and go and live on the streets? That, too, is complicated. And often, each case is unique. But generally, it's because they're escaping some kind of trouble at home. This can take all sorts of forms. It can be abuse at home. It can be poverty at home. It can be literally that they are kicked out. But that's why they're going there. That's why they're entering the streets. For some reason, they've upped and left home, or at least been kicked out of home. And the key word there is poverty. Poverty is usually the underlying factor. We'll come back to poverty and what that means a bit later. Now, the streets are attractive to a child whose home life is awful. Okay, the streets would offer camaraderie, freedom perhaps, or at least the perceived idea of freedom, safety from the terrible events they might be suffering from at home, and more often than not, children do not see that they've got any option than to run to those streets. Once there, though, life is going to take probably a turn for the worst, no matter how bad the circumstances were to start with. So, Toybox then, back to Toybox, where do they work? Well, Toybox works with street children in 6 countries around the world. There's Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Peru, Bolivia, and where have we got? And Colombia. Now, at the moment, they work in the big cities, because that's where the street children are, and they tend to set up homes in and around those cities. They're trying to spread out their work. At the moment, they work with tens of thousands of children, but their work, they're trying to grow. But that's where they are, Central and South America. You won't find them in the other places I've talked about. This is their mission. It's that area of the world. What do they do? Well, we know that Toybox, who they work with and where they work, what do they do and how do they do it? Well, Toybox doesn't send out teams of missionaries from the UK. Okay, we have our base here in the UK, but there's actually very few people employed here. The reason is that we understand that local organisations far better understand the context of the places where the street children are. The local organisations will have programmes that are good and suited to the children and the children's needs. They'll know about the children, they'll know about their backgrounds. So sending people from here would be expensive and counterproductive. It's far more cost effective to find good people over there, good charities, and fund them and help them to do the work that needs to be done. So Toybox provides the funds, the technical support to these partners so that they can carry out their work in the field. Now, each child's needs are going to be different, so unique approaches are necessary to tackle them. And as a result, we've got all sorts of partner organisations that help us, from social workers, local churches, the charities that already exist there in Central and South America. So we work with all sorts of people on the small scale and the big. Now, what we do there, though, is a 3-stage process. And probably the first and most important stage is prevention. Now, the aim of the Toybox prevention work is to stop children getting onto the streets in the first place. Okay, stop them getting into that gang life, that drug abuse, the prostitution, the child labour, the slavery, which awaits them on the streets. So they have a kind of a lookout system there, and again with these partner organisations. A lookout system where they try and find the children who are at need before they end up in the streets. Okay, so when a children is identified as being at risk, then intervention takes place, prevention intervention. Now, just to get a kind of a picture of this, I'm going to show you a short video now. It's called Maria's Story. We should be able to see and hear that on the big screen in just a second.
My name is Maria. I'm 13 years old and live in Guatemala City. When I was born, my parents couldn't afford to get me a birth certificate. We were always really poor when I was growing up, and my dad would shout at me and hit me most days. Because I didn't have a birth certificate, I had never seen a doctor or been to a hospital. I couldn't even be admitted to school. The people that could have helped me didn't even know I existed. I was an invisible girl to them. One day, my dad did something so much worse than hit me. I ran out of the house and never went back. I had nothing. Because I was invisible to the authorities, the only place I could go was the streets. I slept in one of the shop doorways, I ate from the bins, and just tried not to get noticed. Then I got sick. I was coughing, crying, and shivering. Everything hurt, and I could hardly move. The streets in Guatemala City are owned by the gangs. I've seen them stab and shoot people, but no one does anything. The boys from the gang came and said they would get me medicine if I did what they wanted. They crowded around me and I just thought, how much worse can it be? I had no energy. I thought of being in a nice place with people who loved me. Afterwards, they went off without giving me any money. They said they'd be back. I was trapped. I would never get better and would probably die on the streets. Maybe not soon enough. Then I heard a kind voice. I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard a kind voice. She said her name was Gabriella, and she worked for an organisation helped by Toybox supporters. She said she could help me, that she knew a doctor who could give me the medicine I needed. She told me about their shelter. It was warm and safe, and I could get better there. I couldn't believe it. I could get off the street. I was scared at first, but Gabriella said that it was up to me. I cried with relief and went with her. While I was getting better, she sorted out all the paperwork to get me a birth certificate. It was hard work and took months and months, but she was determined. Now I'm living with a foster family and feel safe every day. I got my birth certificate just in time for Christmas last year. It felt amazing. Now I go to school every day. I love it. I've almost caught up with the others in my class. When I grow up, I want to be a social worker so that I can help other children like Gabriella helped me. Now I have my birth certificate, I know just how I want my future to be. I want to work and get married and buy a house and have children of my own. I couldn't have dreamed of doing any of that without my birth certificate. It was the best Christmas present I could ever have had. I'm not Invisible Girl anymore. I officially have a name. My name is Maria.
Thanks to your support, Toybox is able to help hundreds of children like Maria, living and working on the streets, to get their birth certificates and other identification documents, giving them their name and all the protection and opportunity that comes with it. Thank you.
Okay, so I've mentioned the first stage of the work that Toybox does, prevention, trying to stop the children getting on the streets in the first place. Now that's hard. How can you know when a child is going to end up on the streets? We can look at the schools, get information from teachers, we can find neighbours, friends of people who might be linked to local churches and things like that. But ultimately, lots and lots of children do end up on the streets. We've heard Maria's story there, and we can see how and why she ended up on the streets because of abuse in her house. And her story, sadly, is not at all uncommon. So the second stage of the work they do, and probably the biggest, is the intervention work. So this is where our partner charities go out onto the streets and meet the children, and try and build a relationship with them. They'll spend a lot of time out there in the community of the street children because they do have a community. They do get together. They are in gangs and groups. So that's where you've got to go and got to meet them and build the relationships and build the trust. But this is hugely difficult. If you imagine Maria there, she's run away from home because of abuse there. So she's obviously got two adults, or at least one adult there, that she's not trusting. She's ended up on the streets. She's going to be treated like vermin by those around her. The shopkeepers aren't going to trust her that are nearby because, well, she's probably stealing from their shops. The police are probably inundated with complaints about street children, so they're not going to have the most positive outlook on the street children, and they too can be abusive. So the street children there are completely distrusting the adults around them. So as you can imagine, building that relationship is very, very difficult. The bad experiences make the children very distrustful of any adults, including the street workers. But that's the street workers' job, is to build that relationship. We kind of have this sort of idea here that perhaps all these street children, they just need someone to turn up with a bus and cart them off to somewhere nice and look after them. But it simply isn't like that. To try and break through, to break into the community of street children, and even just prize one child off the street so that they want to come away is difficult. But the street workers are there to do that. And whilst they're building those relationships, they're also providing essential support and services to the children who are on the streets. Medical aid, food for those who are desperately hungry, a warm place to stay perhaps on a cold night, at least steps that can be taken until we can get the child off the street. Now, the third and final stage is, it's reintegration, it's called. The best outcome, we believe, for a street child, the best outcome is if we can get them back with their family. That's where they belong. And not all cases are like Maria's, where there has been some kind of horrible abuse. Most of the time, children walk away from their families because there is nothing there for them, literally no food, nothing, no money. So they walk away. But with help and support, we can often, very often, get the child back with their family. This is the best outcome, and with some help, counselling, financial support, we can get that family to start again, a new start to their life. But again, often it's the parents are unable or perhaps even not safe to care for that child sufficiently. So we do have, in all the big cities, around those big cities, we have care homes, residential homes, which Toybox helps and finances to support. In these places, there's other children who've experienced the same sort of decline onto the streets, the violence, the terror, and it's a place where they can come and be safe. This is a place where they can support and look after them until they grow up. In these places, what we can give them the food, we can give them the clothing, we can give them the warm, safe place to live. We can give them the education, get them back into schools, and most importantly, we can give them the Christian love that they probably never felt in their lives. So that's their 3 stages. There's the prevention, let's not let them get on the streets in the first place. There's the intervention, and then, when necessary, the reintegration. Okay, so we've been doing this a while, since 1992, so what impact, you might be asking, have we had? Okay, well, in 2015, the figure stood at about 12,000 street children have now been saved from the streets in some way through one of those things. Okay, so through us and the partner charities that support us. So our reach is pretty big, 12,000, that's a good number. Of course, I quoted a figure before of hundreds of millions. So it is the tip of the iceberg, really. But nonetheless, 12,000 street children saved off the streets is a good number. And we are determined to reach the best outcome for all the children, all the children we possibly can. So we're stretching out to other cities. We're stretching out to more and more children all the time. We go out and we monitor. We have a small team here in the UK, but they go out regularly to South and Central America, to those cities, and they check up and they see what's going on, how our money is being spent, how the children are being looked after. So our provision is very well monitored, and it's a very high standard. And one of our boasts is that every pound that's given to Toybox, we know that 84 pence in the pound will be directly spent in those projects on the ground in Latin America. Okay, so that's a pretty good percentage. It would beat, I think, any non-Christian charity where money, of course, is recycled and is put back into fundraising. And it's pretty much up there, I think, with all the other big charities that do this sort of work, like Compassion and so on. Now, it's an interesting thing is poverty. In this country, my wife, for example, she's worked for a couple of charities recently. One was a children's centre, and now she works for a charity that provides food banks. And so she has a real insight into poverty. And part of her work is to measure the statistics that go with poverty. And in this country now, we have these relative deprivation indexes. So we would define poverty by comparing people. I think this is quite an important thing to do. So, you may think yourself reasonably well off, but if you're living next door to someone who's mighty rich, then relatively you would be compared to them as being in poverty. So it's a tricky measure, but it's a useful one. It highlights things. So to give an extreme example, the Prince of Wales in Clarence House, living next door to the Queen in Buckingham Palace, she's obviously much richer than him, so relatively, you could have a sort of silly example, but he would relatively be poorer. Okay, so there's a relative poverty index. Now, if we look at these street children and then compare ourselves to them relatively, the difference is massive. Okay, there are a lot of the things that we take for granted, all those things we mentioned, the food, the shelter, we don't worry about these things really, not much, not often in our lives do we have to, but they don't have it. The love, the care, the things that our kids take for granted, don't they, and don't spend a moment's thought on, they don't have. Okay, so relatively, these kids really are in a bad way. So I'm going to talk now about the ways that we can help and the ways that our help can actually make a difference to this poverty.
What about families, their immediate families, like not the mum and dad,
Yeah.
their aunts and uncles and their grandmas,
Yes.
people like that, do they not support?
They do, and when we were talking before about the fact that Toybox is, its main aim is not actually to get them into homes, it's to get them back to family. That's one of the things they do, if they can get to know the community that the child lives in and then get to know the family, because family is a bigger thing probably in South America than it is over here. Family networks are bigger and stronger. And often, and the majority of cases, I'm pleased to say, that the children don't end up in homes. They will go back to their family, or if it's not the mum and dad, it may be grandma and granddad, it may be an auntie and uncle. So it's a big part of the work, because of course, not only is that a better solution, but it's a far cheaper solution. So that's what is much cheaper to support auntie and uncle than it is to put the child into a home. So yeah. So these are some of the ways we can help. Now, we have the Child Ambassador Programme, first of all, and that's what I've seen on the wall out there, which is great to see. That's the way in which you're supporting Sheila. Sheila is a young lady who's one of the more mature, I suppose is the best way to put it, one of the more mature members of a street children's home that she's in. And Sheila's job is to be the ambassador. So when we sponsor Sheila, what we're really doing is we're not sponsoring that child or giving the money direct to that child, we're sponsoring the home that she's in. It's a much more effective way of spending the money, so we don't limit ourselves to one specific child. So the money that you send, the £21 every month, goes to Sheila or Sheila's home, and it supports her there. So that money is being spent literally on taking Sheila off the streets, taking those children off the streets, paying for that home, the lighting, the heating, paying for the food, paying for them to go to school, all that sort of thing. So that's the first way we can support, by adopting a child ambassador. One of the nice returns we get from that is Sheila's been chosen because she's up for and willing and able to sort of communicate with us. So she sends updates on what's going on in her life and her home, and that gets sent here to Oswald Twistle so that you can read about it in the regular updates you get through the post. Now, a second way to help is to become a best friend. Now, the money that's sent to being a best friend, that's £15 a month, that's going directly to the people working on the streets. So that'll be paying for your youth workers, your social workers, or paying for the stuff that's needed, the food, the medical, maybe doctor's bills, those sorts of things. So that's where that goes. It's all about getting into the lives of the children on the streets and investing in the people to try and prize them away, to get them to somewhere safe, get them back to their family or home if necessary. Okay, now, another important thing that we do now, and this is hence the question about poverty. One of the things that Toybox has discovered through working now 20-odd years in South and Central America is one of the biggest forms of poverty is invisibility, not being seen. And it's particularly acute in this part of the world. Children on the streets don't have a birth certificate. Now, this to the governments and the authorities around there is the biggest cop-out that they can have, because by not having a birth certificate, they don't fall under anybody's responsibility. Nobody is responsible for them. They don't exist. They're not on official statistics or books. So, not having it means they've no entitlement to any hospital care or medical care. They've no entitlement to any schooling. Okay? They've no entitlement to any social care or anything like that. So they really are invisible to the state. One of the most powerful things, and so cost-effective things that Toybox can do and does do, is to get these children a birth certificate, get them officially recognised, because then they fall under the remit of the local authorities and they have to acknowledge them and they have to give them at least some kind of basic care. So it's a funny thing that you probably wouldn't think about when you talk about poverty, but just having that birth certificate, being officially recognised, not being invisible anymore, is massive and powerful and relatively easy to do compared to the other things that we've mentioned anyway. Okay, so what more? What more are we talking about then this morning? Well, what I'm going to ask you to do today is not all about the money. Okay, it's not. And we've already talked and I've already thanked you for the money you give. But it is about profile. Now, we're probably most of us aware of what the media is like these days. All sorts of terrible things happen in the world, and media turns their attention to them. We had Paris last week, an absolute awful atrocity. But other atrocities are not fashionable. Okay, they're not fashionable at all. They don't get noticed. We've talked about 100 million people, 100 million children living on streets. So if you look at that figure, how many each day are dying on those streets? How many are falling into drug abuse? How many are falling into prostitution? Well, we're talking thousands, if not millions. It's horrible, but it's there. So one of the things that we must do is raise that awareness, to be aware. Now, we don't need anything dramatic necessarily. We don't need marches to London or that sort of thing, but we just need people to be aware, to read about the Toybox's work, to find out from the website what we do, to find out what's going on over there, to read the updates that come through when the envelope comes through the post with Sheila's information in. So we need people to be aware. And being Christian people, we know that once aware, that we need to pray. So one of the big things I'm asking for you to do today is to make the link with Sheila more than just the £21 a month, more than just the poster on the wall, is to make it a real live link, to take an interest, find out about her life, find out about what's going on in her children's centre, and to pray for her. That is, as we know, that is the most powerful thing we can do as Christians, is to pray. Now, there's all sorts of other opportunities to help as well. You can donate, fundraise. And my job this year, I'm running I don't know why on earth I did this, because I'm not a runner, but I'm running the London Marathon in April to raise some money for Toybox. I haven't done it yet. Don't clap. The training is... Yes, the training is painful. I'm almost halfway. I can almost run halfway, so I think I'll get there. But it's to come up with ways to raise some funds as a church. If you go onto the website, it's a good website, it's a nice, easy one to find your way around. You'll find that they're constantly updating and suggesting ways and things you can do, ways to raise the profile and ways to fundraise. And there's some fantastic Christmas activities on there you can do with just the children or do as a church. And you can learn an awful lot at the same time about the lives of people at the other side of the world. But for me, I think it is an amazing thing. And I'm not just talking about Toybox now, but these charities that set up Compassion and all those others that set up. Because what they empower us to do is to do something we just couldn't do on our own. It's basically to reach out to the other side of the world and literally save a life, I think is the way to put it. To save a life, to pluck somebody off the streets and put them into a place of safety. And it's quite an amazing thing when you think about that you can reach, you sitting here in the UK, you can reach across to the other side of the globe and save a life. How else could we save a life? Yeah, but there's the means to do it, to make a massive impact. We bring up our own children, okay, we live in our own families, and of course we do anything for them and invest all our life and energy into those, but it's so simple to actually reach across and to save somebody else. So, I'm going to finish up with a Bible verse now, a psalm in fact. I like the Psalms a lot, it's my favourite bit of the Bible, so I'm always looking for psalms that are relevant to today. And I think this psalm, or at least this section of this psalm, is very relevant to what we're talking about. And this is from Psalm 82. And it goes like this. God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hands of the wicked. The gods know nothing. They understand nothing. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. I said, you are gods. You are all sons of the Most High. Now, I'm not a Bible scholar by any means, but that speaks to me, that says to me, there is God now, and to us, we're his children, we're his sons, and we are, in many ways, to him, little mini gods, little potential gods. And if you were a street child on the other side of that world, and you somehow looked across and saw our lives with the relative wealth that we enjoy, then they must be thinking something along the same lines that, in comparison, we are gods. We have the money, we have the affluence, we have the power. So that psalm speaks to me. It says that we have that power. It's given to us. We have the power to be able to do something for them. God has given us power. He's given us the opportunity. And there's lots of ways to take advantage of that. But it's definitely worth thinking about this morning. How could you make a difference to those children? Thank you very much for listening to me this morning. It's been lovely coming here. It was lovely coming in with my daughter, Catherine. I hope you all met Catherine. But we felt very welcome. So I've had a very nice morning. Thank you very much.